r/NoSleep. Posted by u/Emil6. A tiny door appeared in my attic and now strange things are starting to happen. I've always been in love with Victorian houses, so, when I saw this one up for rent on Marketplace, I immediately messaged the landlord. After viewing it, I handed in my application and hoped for the best. I had applied to tons of other places, with no luck. When I was accepted, I cried and couldn't believe my luck. It needed a bit of work, mostly paint and minor things, which I told the landlord I could easily do, hoping to swing his tenant selection my way. Apparently it worked and seemed to be a dream come true. Best of all, it came with a surprisingly large, open attic. After a bit of tidying up and minor repairs, I would make the attic my getaway room, my mom cave if you will. My recent separation hasn't been easy on the kids, but I thought a cool new house might perk them up a bit. The house was big enough for them to have their own rooms and had a nice backyard to play in. Most of the rooms in the house were relatively small, but workable and would give everyone their own space. Once I had gotten the rest of the house set up and unpacked, I focused on the attic. I'm a creative person. I sew, draw, build miniatures, and do a variety of other crafts, so the open attic would be perfect once the space was ready. There were 2 windows on the front wall of the house that let in a nice amount of afternoon sun. Under one of the windows was a bench. It needed work, but would make a perfect book nook if I fixed it up. I decided to start there, figuring I could take reading breaks in between fixing and setting up the rest of the attic. Some of the boards were loose and cracked along the front of the bench. It seemed stable, just needed the front end cushion replaced. Taking measurements to the local hardware store, I got the pieces I needed and a box of nails, so I was ready to work on it when I had the chance. Once I got the kids off to school the following Monday morning, I got to work. I started by prying the boards off the front of the bench. They came off relatively easily since most were already loose, but it still took me a couple of hours. I took the opportunity to sweep out any crap and dust that had gathered underneath the bench. It was dark underneath, so I just haphazardly went at it with a broom. Among piles of dust and such, I swept out a long piece of rope and some black candles. The rope was pretty frayed and the half-used candles, somewhat deformed, probably from sitting under there for so long. On my next sweep in, I hit something heavy enough that I could barely budge it with a broom. I got on my hands and knees and reached under the bench, feeling around on the dusty floor, hoping my hand didn't encounter a giant spider or something worse. It felt like some kind of metal box. I pulled it out and sure enough, I was right. It was a small metal box about 6 wide and 4 high. It appeared to be pewter, decorated with intricate designs, and adorned with a deep red gem in the middle of the lid. Beautiful really, despite being quite dusty and tarnished, like it had been under there for a while. I attempted to open it, but it appeared to be locked somehow. Figuring a good cleaning would allow me to figure out how to get it open, I got a rag and wiped it down. While doing so, a sharp piece of metal from the box cut deep into my finger. I yanked my hand up, causing blood to drip onto the top of the box. My blood suddenly absorbed into the gem on top of the box and was gone in an instant. I must have imagined it. How could blood absorb into it like that? Pushing on my cut finger, I made another drop of blood fall onto the box again. I looked in disbelief as the second drop was sucked into the box as well. Then I heard a click and the lid popped open. Putting the open box down on one of my work table, I grabbed a tissue and wrapped it around my bleeding finger. Didn't want a chance getting more blood on the box or its contents. I quickly returned to the box, eager to see what was inside. It was lined with dark, mauve velvet and contained a gold locket, a folded up piece of paper, and a clump of light brown, cut hair. I examined the locket first. Opening it, I found a portrait on each side. A man and a woman, in their late 20s, early 30s I'd guess. The man was handsome, with an intense stare. The woman had kind eyes and a captivating smile. The photos were small and focused almost solely on their heads, so I couldn't see what they were wearing to judge how old the photos were. There were no inscriptions on the locket, just the outline of a heart, engraved on the front. Skipping over the hair clump, I moved on to the piece of paper. It was discolored from age and seemed delicate. I gently opened it, careful not to cause any damage. It contained a paragraph of writing, which appeared to be written in calligraphy. I couldn't tell if it was written with a quill or calligraphy pen, but it definitely wasn't a big ballpoint, which led me to believe it was old. The language in the text was totally unfamiliar to me. Most letters were those in the English alphabet, but the combination of them didn't look like any language I had ever seen before. Now, I don't thoroughly know a bunch of different languages, I'm just saying I couldn't attribute it to any language I had come across before. I decided to call up my friend David, to see if he could decipher what language it may be in. He answered after a couple of rings and I explained what I had found, before proceeding to attempt to read from the paper. Insert demonic summoning spell here. I think it's safest not to share the actual spell. Wouldn't want to risk anyone else unleashing something. David wasn't sure what language it could be either. Maybe Latin? He guessed. Maybe. I probably just summoned the devil or something, I joked. In hindsight, I should have known better. I have always been a horror movie addict, and this was one of the first rules of horror movie survival. Do not read the Latin. Honestly, it was pretty neat to read. I have always loved witchcraft and spells and such. But now it was time to get back to work. I wanted to get as much done as I could before the kids got home from school. Getting off the phone with David, I folded the piece of paper back up, put it back in the box, closed the lid, and went back to cleaning out underneath the bench. I didn't find anything else under there other than dust and dirt. The rest of the bench structure seemed in good shape, so I started putting some of the new boards up while I waited for the kids to get home. The rest of the day was just like any other day. The kids got home, I made dinner, we ate, hung out for a bit, and then everyone got ready for bed. Once the kids were asleep, I had a hot bath and relaxed. The cut on my finger was looking pretty rough, so I loaded it up with polysporin, wrapped it in a band-aid, and figured it would be in better shape the following morning. The attic work must have really worn me out, because I slept like a log. I woke up feeling somewhat groggy, however, and it took me a bit to finally roll out of bed. I trudged to the kitchen to make coffee. The kids were stirring shortly after, and my daughter, 8, skipped into the kitchen. She was always chipper and talkative in the morning. While she was telling me all about her favorite Encanto character, she suddenly stopped and asked, "Mom, what's that on your arm?" I looked down to where she was pointing. A centimeter away from her finger was a red spiral. It almost appeared to be carved into my arm, ever so delicately. "Oh, another one," she exclaimed, pointing further down my forearm. Sure enough, there was another. Upon looking both my arms up and down, I noticed 4 on one arm and 5 on the other. All the same spiral pattern. Where could these marks have come from? Once the kids had gotten off to school, I decided to thoroughly check my bed. What if I had bed bugs or something? I took the sheets off, checked all around the mattress, in the seams, underneath, behind the headboard, everywhere. I couldn't find anything. I decided to wash my sheets, just in case, then shrugged it off and headed back to work in the attic. I had been working for maybe half an hour, when something caught my attention. While on my hands and knees, hammering the bottom of a board in place, I saw it, a tiny door at the bottom of the wall across from me. I swear that wasn't there yesterday, or any other day I had been up there. One of the first things I did in the attic was wipe down the baseboards. Surely, I would have noticed. I went over to the door and squatted down in front of it to get a better look. It was only about 3 high by 2 wide. Made out of wood and painted red. There was a symbol painted on it in black that appeared to be the silhouette of a fairy perhaps? It was so tiny that it was hard to tell. The doorknob was minuscule, so much so that I couldn't even hold it to see if turning it would open the door. As strange as it was actually adorable. I took a picture of it to send to David and then got back to work. Fairy doors are really popular these days, perhaps my daughter put one up here. I couldn't think of any other reasonable explanation for it just seeming to appear. The rest of the day went on like the day before. At dinner, I asked my daughter about the fairy door. She had no idea what I was talking about. My sons claimed the same. I felt a sense of unease and a pit in my stomach. Could someone have broken into the house and put it there? I made sure to double-check all the doors and windows were locked, before heading to bed. I didn't want to take any chances. My cut finger didn't seem to be looking any better. It didn't really bother me pain-wise, but didn't appear to be healing as much as I thought it should. I repeated the band-aid routine and went to bed. Not sure if it was due to the door or the thought of someone being in my house, but my sleep that night was horrible. It felt like I never quite got into a deep sleep. I had vivid dreams of little fairies or pixies or something of the sort. I'm not even sure what they were. Laying on my back on my bed, I couldn't move my body, as if I was paralyzed from the neck down. All I could do was watch them. Their bodies were humanoid form, tiny, with wings, but they had no mouth, only 2 little nostrils in place of a nose, and concave sockets for eyes. Their hands and feet came down into sharp points instead of having fingers and toes. Upon their bald head was a jagged crown. I couldn't determine what it was made out of. I want to say leaves, but if so, they were dead leaves, thick and stiff. They twirled and danced around on my skin, like figure skaters on a small patch of ice. Wherever their dancing began, blood would seep out of my skin and be sucked up into their feet. Their pale, almost white bodies would turn pink upon sucking up my blood, slowly, getting darker and darker until they became a deep red. At that point they all flew up and zoomed into the now open, mini door, one by one. The door immediately shut after the last of them entered and I woke up. Quickly sitting up, I looked all over my body. The spirals were everywhere. I assumed I must have felt their creation in my sleep, had the door symbol in my head, and my mind made a crazy dream to explain what was happening. Searching my bed again, I tried to find whatever was actually leaving the marks on me, but again I was unsuccessful. In order to not freak out the kids, I made sure to put on a long-sleeve shirt and pants while getting them ready for school, and tried my best not to show the concern I had of what was going on while I slept. Once they had left, I made my way up to the attic and headed straight for the tiny door. I didn't believe that anything nefarious was occurring at that point, but needed to look at it, just to ease my mind. A deep pit in my stomach occurred as I came upon the door. It was still there, but it had changed. It was bigger by a couple of inches each way and a dark brown in color. The new symbol on the door resembled a blob with tiny arms. WTF? I sat and stared at it for a good 10 minutes. What do I even do here? What is happening? Am I losing my mind? I needed to get my mind off the door, so I started working on the bench again. It took everything in me not to look at the door every minute. I kept picturing it opening while my back was turned. After a couple of hours of this, I gave up and decided to leave the attic and occupy myself baking, away from the door. Deciding not to tell the kids, I made out like everything was normal and we went about our evening as per usual. Unable to get the door out of my mind, I decided to do some research once the kids were in bed. Searching fairy doors on the internet just brought me images and tales of adorable fairies and their doors. Or DIY instructions on how to make them. I searched up evil fae, but that didn't seem to give me any results similar to what was occurring in my home. David was my next shot. Not confident he would know what's going on, but he had a way of easing my worries and fears. He suggested I ask here. So here I am. I am fucking terrified to go to sleep at this point. I can't think of any harmless reason this is occurring. Could someone be in my house that I'm unaware of? Or does anyone have any thoughts on the door? The box? Any help is greatly appreciated.